This episode was brought to you by Unitas Lending.
Hey guys, I'm Brent Starts.
And I'm Sonny Evans, and this
This
is Thinking Out Loud. That was great.
The show where two believers from completely different generations bite the bullet and talk about life, culture, and how to survive the in-betweens.
Today we're talking about Airbnb.
Let's do it.
What does Airbnb even stand for? Is that bed and breakfast?
You know where it's from? It was a college guy that had a extra room, and it was an air mattress he had, and he rented it out when sporting events were in town and people needed a place to stay, and started renting it out, his room.
Interesting. It's interesting how big it's grown too. I know there's so many people who use it as a secondary income now. You said you didn't have any Airbnbs, right, Mr. Starts?
No, I never owned one. I've had rental properties, long-term rentals, but never an Airbnb. But I have looked into it actually.
Does it have it? It has its own app, right? And that's how you do everything with
Right.
its app.
Yeah, it's really convenient. We've used Airbnb several times. We had a hurricane about 4 years ago, I guess it was, and we left town and we went up and stayed in Nashville. Wonderful experience, amazing experience. This house was gorgeous, and I think we paid, it was like $1,300 for 10 days, so about $130 a day, and it was like 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, beautiful area, lots to do. I mean, it was really value. I don't know if it was just because of it in Nashville. Maybe it's a little more expensive here. My understanding is a little more expensive here in Florida.
I mean, I paid just the amount of people I know that were paying in the same house that I was at in their Airbnb, and they were renting it for extremely high prices compared to like just renting a room, you know? Like I'm saying, like they could have rented a whole month's worth at somewhere else in the same town for probably what they spent Airbnb for a week.
Yeah. It's interesting. The other place we stayed was in Augusta, Georgia. It's famous for its golf course. We were literally 2 blocks from the golf course that's famous there, and it was an old styled place. It was really interesting. It was really wonderful. Again, wonderful experiences we've had with them. I know a lot of people complain about, it's changed lately with people making it a business, and that's.
I think it just depends on who's running it. It's like a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to have really good ones, and then you're going to have ones that are just like you're never going to return to ever again. And unfortunately, I've experienced more the second kind, you know?
Right. No, I'm with you. It's like you say, it is a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they call them super hosts, right? The ones that have high ratings and.
Right. I don't know. Just as somebody who was renting a house that was also being Airbnb'd out, it was very. I mean, I wasn't in on the conversation at all. I just don't know what the metrics are for like inviting somebody else into a home that you're already renting. Like, I don't know if like can you rent a half of a home out or only. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
How does that work?
It's a great question. Typically it's in the lease that you're either allowed or not allowed. Almost always you're not allowed to sublease the space because, you don't have the financials of that person. You don't have the background checks or anything like that. So usually most leases prohibit any subleasing. But, if you're leasing a room out possibly or something like that on a onesie-twosie basis, I think
I'm talking about like I lived at a house where I had a new roommate every week.
Wow.
Yeah. Sometimes it was a guy, sometimes it was a girl, sometimes three days and they'd leave, and then I have maybe 2 or 3 days before the next person came in. But it was definitely an interesting experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, when they're actually in your space, I mean that's different.
Like
right?
I'm talking about two bedroom condo. I'm in one master, and the other master was always a different person. And then I had the landlord who was living on the couch at the time.
Wow. Hey, there's ways to make ends meet, though, right? I mean, seriously, I think that's what it started out as, right?
When he first invited us in, it was really interesting because I thought like, hey, this guy said he spent a lot of time in Colombia and he wasn't going to spend a lot of time there, so that's the only reason why he'd like sleep on the couch for a couple nights because he didn't need the place for the entire month. But then it turned out to him sleeping there for like 28 days and like only leaving for like 3, So you really got to get it in paper. You know what I mean? You can't take somebody at their word, like, oh, don't worry, I'm never here. It's like define never.
Right. Wow. That's an interesting setup. Yeah. Yeah.
That was right here on Jensen Beach too. It's over there. I had a condo right near Jensen Beach, right by Jensen Beach Boulevard.
Wow. You mind me asking what it ran roughly?
I probably paid $1,000 a month.
Okay.
Right. I had to come up with 2 for first and last when I first moved in.
Okay.
And then I want to say the guy was renting Airbnb the other room out for at least $120, $130 a day.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So I mean, for 10 days rent, you could probably,
You're
And then he'd cut Airbnb out of the picture, right? Because he'd go to the person and be like, okay, if you only want to rent 3 days through Airbnb, that's fine. I'll cut them out and you just pay me and stay here. You know what I
Oh, I
mean?
gotcha.
So, I mean, that's one of the negatives of Airbnb. You give everybody the power and then they can abuse it however they want and like do
Right.
loopholes. Like, what's to
Interesting.
stop somebody from coming for one day and me being
Yeah.
like, hey, I'll give you a less of a rent just to cut Airbnb out,
Right.
right? Just so I know I'm getting it paid and who's to say, who
Right.
I let stay at my house or not,
That's interesting. I think there's what we noticed. I think we've stayed at 2 or 3 now.
They do it with Uber. If you
Yeah.
ride somebody 2 or 3 times and they keep getting you every single day, they'll be like, hey, here's my personal phone number, right?
Right.
Don't even Uber. Just call me up right before you need a car, you know what I mean? And I'll come over and I'll come get you.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's dangers to, I'm saying, you giving the consumer all the tools, because then they can undercut you.
That's interesting. Right. Never knew that, but
Mhm.
that makes perfect sense. Streetwise, right, son?
Yeah, that's something you get into the Uber and you'd be like, hey, guy, you have a private driving company? And the guy's like, I'll just give you my cell phone number. I'll take you wherever you want. Just give me a call,
Right. That's wild.
Especially because I think Uber takes like a good 50% of the thing. I don't know how much Airbnb takes, and I also don't know how much liberty they have with like setting the price for what they have, right? Because I know there's like cleaning fees.
Right. And lately, that's an issue, is what I understand. Cleaning fees and really, I think there's some flexibility, and people can probably charge what they like. I would think. I know they did an inspection, and we have a deposit on the ones we stayed at. So, and I guess if you had a bunch of buddies that that rowdy and they're having a Super Bowl party, it might be a bigger mess than a family.
I just don't know what the standards are. There's probably a terms of service where like there's only can be so many people in a house. Because what's to
Yeah.
stop me and 12 friends from just renting a 4-bedroom and like just crashing there on couches and sleeping on the floor? You know what I mean?
Right.
Will that equate out to $20 a person or something like that?
They wanted to know how many people were going to be in the room, and so we have a larger family, and so I think we had 4 kids with us at the time, so 6 and a tiny dog, and so I think there was a pet deposit or something like that we had to pay at one of them, but they were interested, but they found we were all one family. It was no big deal.
I remember I went to a party, and it was at the same Airbnb that we had previously partied at, and there was just a different person throwing the party and everything, but it was the same house and everything. So I was like, wow, I've actually been in this house before. It was just with different people.
It's funny. Well, you get some really cool houses. I mean, some of them, I think the people that do, the best, I mean, as far as ownership, people that own Airbnbs, the people that really succeed, you nailed it. I think certainly it's the customer service. It's a business, right? So you need to treat the client well. But I also think that they have a unique situation. In other words, something's unique about the property, so it really shows well on Airbnb. As you're going through it, it's like, wow, this would be just a really cool place to stay for a couple days. Or the location, it's near a bunch of activities, or near a venue where concerts are going to take place, that type of thing. So I think the location and the type of property, these tree houses are going for like $400 or $500 a night. They're outrageous. I mean,
I
really
haven't even
cool.
seen that. Tree houses where? In Florida?
Yeah, in Georgia and
In
stuff.
Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
They have tree houses in Georgia.
Tree houses, man, and they're like all the amenities inside. It's pretty cool,
It
So
sits off the ground like it's actually in a tree?
the tree, yeah, with these plank walkways. You know what I mean? That go out to it and things like with.
There was a guy in Texas. He was living in a tree, and they called the cops on him. That's why I want to shout out that guy.
Right, we're living in a tree. Well, some folks live in a tree to. The tree huggers that they don't want.
No, man, that man showed up with a 2x4 and a ladder and just started setting up a tree house.
Really?
And then people just kept driving by, just like they eventually called the cops on him and had to get him out of the tree.
It's like, oh man. Wow.
I also got another story about a kid climbing a tree. So we had a kid. I was a sophomore in high school, and we used to call him Squirrel Boy because every lunch he would only wear denim. Like all his clothes were always denim, like denim pants on denim jacket on denim hat. Never didn't wear denim.
Right.
And every single lunch he'd come to the cafeteria, climb the big tree in the middle of the courtyard, and just sit up there.
Wow.
No one ever said anything to him, but we all just call him the Squirrel Kid.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? When I was a little kid, I was 6 years old. We're believers, right? We talk about this stuff. I was 6 years old. I'd go out in the tree for hours at a time, and I'd talk to my Jesus. I'd come back, my mom goes, "Where were you?" And I'm like, "I was out in the tree." And what were you doing in a tree by
Jesus
yourself?
kept me out of the tree. I
Is
just
that
want
right?
to say, yeah. In high school, you don't climb the tree. That's not what you do.
Is it not cool?
No,
Yeah.
you're the only kid right there for 45 minutes in the middle of the courtyard. You decide to climb it like a flagpole and just sit up there
Yeah.
as a freshman.
Yeah.
come on, you were a
Yeah,
senior once.
that
Yeah,
was
you're
a
just like,
weird
oh my
thing. Yeah,
gosh,
that was
what was
weird.
that kid doing?
He'd
He
be
just,
called
yeah, because the very first 5 days, everyone was sort of like, what, did the kid lose something in the tree? Like, why is he still up there?
Tree boy.
Yeah,
all sorts of
exactly.
names,
Tree
right?
boy. Yeah,
Right.
this is the squirrel kid.
Squirrel kid, right?
Yeah,
Number of
and the denim didn't
nicknames.
help him.
Oh no. Yeah, some people just the world needs all different types, right?
Yeah, well, hey, I never met him because he was always up there and I could never talk to him, but I hope he's doing well now as like a FP&L pole climber or something, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The skill translates.
Yeah, hopefully he had a passion for climbing and now he's a climbing instructor
That's right.
for FP&L.
Well, cool, man. I'll tell you what. Have you ever stayed at a
I
Airbnb?
lived in one
You
for
lived on one?
yeah, I
Have you
lived in
ever-
one that wasn't an Airbnb on my
Okay.
side. I'm not sure how legal it was, but I lived in one for a good 3 or 4 months
Yeah.
and probably had a good between 12 and 20 different roommates at that point,
Yeah.
Guys, girls, people from all over. There's a lot of people who stay in those when they like pick up a temporary job.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they're only here for like 10 days or maybe like 3 or 4 weeks or at max a couple months, And I know the people like we have a power plant in Fort Pierce, and a lot of the people who stayed at the power plant, I don't know what they were doing specifically, but they had specific jobs or whatever. They were just brought in there to work for like 3 or 4 weeks,
Right.
and that was it. And then going back to where they were from.
Right. Yeah, there's like temporary housing, like that type of thing for laborers, things like that. I mean, it worked well, but we do real estate loans for a living. That's what I do for a living, obviously. So, one of the things we've seen a lot of is condos that aren't warrantable. In other words, you can't get a loan on them. Basically, a normal conventional loan without putting 30% down. And if you're an investment property, you need to put more down on some of these loans because of the type of structure that the condo station's under. And so, there's unwarrantable condos. People are turning them into short-term rentals. So the hardest things to get approved is, short-term rentals in a condominium. So it's really hard to get approved for a loan if you're going to do a short-term rental. Mm-hmm. But with this non-QM stuff, they'll use what a long lease might look like, a year lease, long-term lease, and they're using that and if that covers the payment, you can buy with 20% down these things that you can't get it financed in any other way. So it's a really cool niche people are doing here in Florida. They're buying these, inexpensive condos and turning them into Airbnb, and the cash flow is nice on them. I've done a couple loans for an individual that's his business plan moving forward. That's all he wants to do. He's doing really well. I think that a lot of these they're
It's not as easy as you think, though.
There's
It
work.
requires you a lot. I mean, because somebody from the outside might think like that's the most easy job in the world. You just use your money to make more money, right? You just
Right.
buy another condo, okay, and then that next one pays for the next one, and the next one pays for the next one. But you really have to be a really savvy business owner, because if you don't get the right Airbnb and you get the wrong neighborhood, or you know what I mean, if it's not the right positioning, you're gonna suffer losses on that, and it's actually gonna set you back in the long term. So it's like that guy, he's a very specific circumstance because he's financially
Right.
and savvy,
Yeah.
right? And I'm willing to say that guy, he decides a long time before he decides what's the next Airbnb he's going to pick up. It's not willy-nilly.
Oh no,
Because
not
a
at
lot of
all.
these kids nowadays, they're like, oh, it's the job. It doesn't require anything. You just need money to start doing it. It's like, no, you requires expertise. It's like almost you got to pick a horse.
It does.
All right. You
Whereas
got to know. Yeah, you got to know this is the right area. You got to know how saturated is this area, how many Airbnbs are in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because that's why there's so many really successful ones in Fort Pierce, is because there's none of them else out there.
Hey, if any of the listeners are interested in this, there's a website called AirDNA, AIRDNA.com, and it's a website you can go to, and you can find your competitors, what they're charging and all that stuff locally, and so you can get a feel for the market, and you can run a pro forma to see, hey, would this area make sense? And so that was something that somebody turned me on to help out. Hey, this is how I'm going to get this to make sense, because he was trying to apply for a loan. And so yeah, I mean, there's some great resources out there now. There are companies that are popping up basically to take care of Airbnbs, that they specialize in it. So you call them when you need a cleaner to come and take care of it.
Yeah,
And
we had a
from-
maid service at the place when I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the owner really isn't the person managing the site, or typically, right?
Generally,
Generally.
I was the manager.
You were kind of
Yeah, I was the other tenant, and then like when other people like left, it'd be like, "Is everything cleaned up in there?" I'd have to like go in their quarters and everything and just see, what was going on. See, I was always
Yeah.
thinking I would go above and beyond for my landlord because he'd always cut me in at some point,
Yeah.
and he never did. He was just using me for free labor.
Right. He was like a tenant with a checklist of chores, right?
Right.
You know what
I
I
was
mean?
like, he's like, go check on the thing, make sure they clean their bathroom and everything. And to me, it's like, if I just got to peek in somebody's room real quick and just see if their bed's made or whatever, I'm fine with that,
Yeah.
But it just gets to a point where it's like, if it becomes habitual, then you're becoming manipulated,
Mm-hmm. Right. No, there's no question. People can kind of, take advantage of a. Of
It's
a
like
person.
a job. You want one. Airbnb is a great idea. You want one, but you want to take care of it really well. You want to make sure you get the right person
Oh yeah.
because it'll set you back if you get the wrong one,
Yeah, they did a little background check on us for one of the rentals. You know what I mean? It's like, I thought it was interesting. I'm like, yeah. So, but it's their property, right? So they want to maintain
Right.
it. And I think my concern would be like, first of all, neighbors. Because like,
What about roommate?
transit-
Like there was no background. Like it's not like he background checked
Yeah,
me
for you.
for the guests coming in, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
they maybe had a background check or something like that.
Yeah.
But like who's to say who's living in this room right here? You know what I mean?
Right.
Especially if you only rent out one room.
Yeah.
I don't know how safe I'd feel. You know what I mean? Because it's like
Yeah.
you don't know who's in the room next door, and you can't request because you don't even know if that room's empty or not.
Right. Wow. I wouldn't like that setup because
Right. I mean, if one of your daughters is staying at an Airbnb and it's like, oh, there's some other guy who's living in the same
down the hall.
not even down the hall, in the same condo,
Yeah.
just like past the bathroom. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like we don't know who this person is. There's
Yeah.
not like I didn't have my profile on Airbnb. I wasn't the person,
Right.
transacting at all. I never met any of the people.
Right.
So like the first time they'd meet me, I'd see them in the hallway and be like, hey, guess what? I'm your roommate now. Wow. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's yeah. Yeah.
And I had the landlord standing between us playing the referee.
Right.
I wonder if he's still successful with that because I think he might have been dabbling in it and he just didn't know how to do it and he was just really, really hurting for cash. I think that's what it was. And
Yeah.
I don't know. You got to be really careful about how you do the Airbnb because after you get a low host score, I don't think you
Yeah.
can get back up.
You can't, recover from that.
Yeah, because who wants to stay at the Airbnb that like 2 times ago, like the AC went out halfway through the stay?
Yeah, hey, I'll tell you what though. I've seen a couple of Airbnb success stories. Another one I'd share with you. The friend of mine. This is a friend of mine actually. He bought, I think it was 22 or 26 acres out in Arkansas, out in the middle of nowhere, right? But it's on this scenic road. There's just it's 20, 30 miles from anything, right? And there are 2 cabins on it, and then there were septic tanks for those 2 small A-frames, A-frame type cabins. And he restored them just, with just minor changes, just dolled them up a little bit, cleaned them up. And the views are amazing. I mean, it's out over a mountain.
Gives vacationers, I
view.
bet, because it's, yeah.
And he rents them. They're rented all the time.
Yeah.
I think he gets 115 a night, and I mean, I think.
I wonder what his overhead is, though. You know what I
Well,
mean?
I
When
think-
you subtract like utilities, water, gas,
Yeah,
there's got to be overhead
the
there,
heating
right?
bill and all that. Yeah, taxes.
When
But
you
the tax-
renovate it, you're not seeing any of that money back, right? Not generally.
Well, he's rented at least 75% of the time, and so he's doing well. I think one of the units basically pays for everything. The other one is all profit. And this is what's the cool part is it's 20 some acres, so he can build another 18 A-frames out there. You know what I mean? Like literally 300 square foot places. You know what I mean, with views
Right,
and
right,
mountains and
right.
stuff. And it's just a beautiful view, and I think he could fill it up. So I think that's his plan. He just wants to continue to pop, more units in there, and just make it a really cool place to kind of come out and get in nature. And with that large of a site, you could put a number of A-frames out there.
My question would be, if the wave is already passed, though.
Yeah, I was wondering
Right.
about that too. They said that there were still not enough hosts. Now, this is something I researched about 8 months ago, and I did some because I wanted to do it myself. And maybe buy a condo in Florida here and just test it out, see if that would work, And from the research that I could find, the location was a huge thing, right? You have to really do your research because, and then you can have a lot of competition come in too, right?
Right. There's no guarantee that you'll be the only Airbnb, going into the market.
Right.
And then you could totally have that same street or whatever flooded by all your other competitors, and it'll just drive you out of business.
Yeah, and that's what to your point, Sonny. Like,
And then you're out a property, right?
Yeah.
And if the value of that property goes down, then you're sitting on an underwater property. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think that one of the things we looked at, what are the long-term lease prospects, right? So like it rents for, let's say, $225 a night. You know what I mean? But a long-term lease, it might be worth $2,000 a month,
right?
That type of thing. So hey, worst case, we could always lease it long-term in that market. That market's really stable. So very seldom do long-term rentals go down. And they're usually extenuating circumstances. A major employer left an area or something like that would cause rents to go down. But right now, I mean, rents in Florida, they've gone up. I mean, it's just there's too many people, not enough homes, not enough doors, not enough roofs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it just comes down to there's poor, like, the demographics in Florida because it started all down south with the heavy population, and then it slowly made its way up to like West Palm, and then it made its way up to like Jupiter, and then it made its way up to, right? So it's constantly that level, like that Fort Lauderdale is constantly like growing almost, right? Where like Broward is what Miami used to be, and now like Port St. Lucie is what sort of Broward used to be, right?
Yeah,
and then in 10 years, probably Okeechobee will be what Port St. Lucie was 10 years ago, right?
Got it.
So
it's just that development's going on. Yeah, I think the next town in our area probably Indiantown because St. Lucie's getting built up to the degree it is.
And we never planned for all these people to come here. It's
No.
not like 10, 15 years ago that's why the value of everything shot up so much and everybody got so much equity in their houses is because no one planned that like Florida's going to be the next spot, really.
We moved here over 12 years ago, and when we moved here, I said this is the best kept secret in the real estate market. I mean, you could buy a townhome.
Yep.
I mean, for in a super nice area for like 150, 160. 3-bedroom, 2-bath townhome. Those same townhomes are pushing 600,000 right now in 12 years.
Right, because more people found out about it. That's it.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. You come to Florida. There's no income tax, and there's no state income tax. And somebody like myself that moved from California, you're looking at 12, 13% state income tax. So if you make $100,000 a year, you just saved yourself $12,000. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, wow, really? It's that different.
The only part of Florida I'd say that was maybe super more competitive like that would be like Miami. Like trying to get like a nice place in Miami would have been a lot harder. Like I'd say it's like comparable to maybe like Los Angeles or like New York, right?
Yeah.
Certain neighborhoods in Miami.
Yeah.
But it's not like, especially 10, 15 years ago, if you bought anything, pretty much it's gone up in value just based on everyone trying to get into Florida.
Right. And now the jobs that are being created in Miami has like it's. I think if I don't want to misquote this, but I think the unemployment rate in Miami, the city of Miami, is under 2%. I mean, it's super low. I mean, I think all of Florida, it's like 2.7. But I think if Miami is just ridiculous. The unemployment, there is no unemployment essentially. If you want a job in Miami, you can find one. And some of the employers are coming down. Goldman Sachs moved down, BlackRock, some of these large investment banking firms. I mean, these are solid paying jobs. A lot of medical because it's an aging population here with the baby boomers and everyone moving here from the Northeast and from the Midwest. So that are retiring. So that medical industry is booming.
I think it's healthy though, just because prior, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, Florida was known as like the retirement spot.
Right.
Like people from different states, they only thought like people would move to Florida when you're right about to retire.
Right.
But I think that now we've sort of like incorporated a lot of like the newer generation. We have a lot more of the tech companies coming in. I know Bitcoin's here now. There's a lot of those tech companies have gone into Miami, just because they're escaping California and Oregon,
Right.
San Francisco. And I definitely feel like now that we have the mix of a lot of that new, it's not as so much old people anymore. I don't want to say it like that. There's not as so much older people anymore. right? Because I remember when I was driving 16, 17, there was the great majority of the people on the road were older people. Like you would know immediately when season was here for like the restaurants because like every other person in their car would have white hair. Right. But now, we're about getting season right now. We're at the end of October. Right. So season's almost here. November, December, January, February, March. That's probably restaurant season around here.
Right.
And there's a little bit more of a population, I'd say, but I definitely feel like there's, communities of all generations. There's young people, there's old people, you know what I mean? There's people all in the middle.
Well, I'm looking out the window right now, and the cars are backed up at 2:30 in the afternoon. It's like, you know what I mean? And it just 2.5 years ago, I didn't see that in mid-afternoon.
Right. Well, we didn't have a Chipotle in Port St. Lucie until like 2010.
Right. Right. That's funny. Yeah, it's definitely it boomed up here, and there's no question. I think there's going to be some adjustments to make. They're going to be widening some roads and things like that. And I think the secret's out, right? We've got a governor that's pretty outspoken, and I think people view Florida as a place where people run free
But I think what we lacked in community and what we lacked in funding before, like when I went to school, there was no sidewalks in Port St. Lucie.
Right. None. Well, when you were a kid,
when I was a kid, there was just fields, and we had to go stand out in the middle of a field until your bus came at like 5:30 in the morning.
Right.
And then you just get on the bus.
Right.
And now they have bus stops and sidewalks, and there's like a racquetball court, and there's a basketball court, there's community center.
Yeah.
Like if I went back to my old neighborhood, you know what I'm saying? They have all sorts of like little workout segment, the little things you work out and you walk by or whatever. They have all that kind of stuff now when they totally didn't have that before. So I'm so happy, I guess, that the same communities that maybe wouldn't have been at that spot to have their community taken care of. I'm glad that at least the money brought amenities.
It did. It brought a number of amenities, and it's not only that. In the 2007-2008 real estate crisis, Port St. Lucie, I don't know if people know this, but that was hit really, really hard because it was kind of like the suburbs, and so people were buying affordable homes considering the time. Literally in 2008, 2009, you could buy a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house for $70,000-$80,000. It was only 2 years old.
Right. You could get a lot. There was so many opportunities in Port St. Lucie right around that time where you could have just gotten a house for a steal. And we can cut this out, but that's why there were so many grow houses in Port St. Lucie during 2014, 2015, 2016.
Yeah, that was
because because people from Miami and West Palm Beach, they knew they couldn't afford big houses down there.
Right.
But if they realized if you go an hour up 95 in Port St. Lucie, you could get a 4-bedroom house for like 75. Right. And if you're looking for a big empty space away from everybody, there's no sidewalks in 2010, 2011. You know what I mean? It was. We were Port St. Lucie for a little bit.
I've heard it described as that now. It's kind of lost its reputation. Actually, it was one of the most dangerous cities in 2008, 2009, 2010 when you were coming up, Sonny. And but now it's one of the safest communities in Florida. So it's really done a flip-flop. And those...
you know why? It used to be an in-between from like people coming up from Miami going up to Atlanta, right? They wouldn't stop in West Palm Beach because there was more like, there's more of a city in West Palm Beach, right? But it's a big empty space out there in Port St. Lucie. So coming up from Miami, coming up from or down from Orlando, that was another thing too. So whether you're coming up or you're going down, people would stop in Port St. Lucie just because there was a lot more open space, and you wouldn't have to deal with the congestion of being in the inner city.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, it's changed dramatically, and I think that with the increased values, the real estate taxes are higher there too, and they had to be to rebuild the infrastructure. You're talking about no sidewalks, no streetlights. All that was corrected too. You've got Tradition there now, and all the new home developments. So all the major home builders are in there now. Which you wouldn't have dreamt of, in 2000. You know what I mean?
It's turned into a completely different city than it was like a decade ago, I'd say.
Right.
There were certain things like we never even had a Chipotle. We never had a Chick-fil-A. A Starbucks was a new thing for us. The funnest thing to do for us was like hang out at the Guitar Center.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. There's cool stuff in there.
And then the only mall that we had was in Jensen Beach. So that was a good 2 cities over. You know what I mean? So you had a good 45 minutes to even get over there. You know, and if you're a kid in high school trying to get 45 minutes anywhere in school, it's like you don't even want to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, as far as getting back to Airbnb, if you're going to do an Airbnb, just highly recommend you go to that website that I mentioned, and AirDNA.
We'll go ahead and we'll drop it in the
The show
description.
notes,
Yeah, we'll drop it in the show notes.
That's cool. Yeah, because I think it really helped people. If they're looking in the possibility of doing that, they can look at the market. Like if you want to Port St. Lucie or something like that, you can find out what specific rentals are going for, and you can pull up on Google Maps. You can pull up, the actual properties itself. You know what I mean, and see what it looks like and all that stuff. I mean, I know that there's another gentleman that does really well. He bought a condo on a golf course up in Port St. Lucie,
and that probably helps you out, when you get more amenities for your Airbnb rental, right? That's probably what you're looking for. Is you're looking for a place that they're finally starting to build that city around there, and people will want to vacation there a lot more. You know?
And obviously anything near the ocean. I mean, when you're up in I grew up in Ohio. When you're up in Ohio, you know what I mean? You think Florida, you're thinking you want to be at the beach, right? You know what I mean? Ideally, anything's better than the middle of winter in Ohio, but just grateful to be anywhere in Florida, but because of the warm weather. But ideally, you'd like to be near the beach, and so I think just being near the beach is a huge plus when you're looking at Airbnb. And as far as what you can charge and how you can get the thing to pencil,
And it's a fun party if you want to do that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, it's funny because, Broward used to be, Fort Lauderdale, when I was in college and stuff in the 80s, that was a thing, you know what I mean? I don't know if it's still the party central like it was, but boy, it was
I think they cracked down. I read an article or something on the regards where you can't throw as many parties at Airbnbs anymore.
Right.
Or there's something, I don't think if it's in the terms of service or... I read an article somewhere where they were cracking down on that because I know there was gated neighborhoods where they'd have one Airbnb on the block and then they would just explode on a Saturday night, and these people didn't like it because they had a homeowners association or something,
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I mean, in the office next door, we had an Airbnb next to the office I was in several years ago before we moved in our new location here. And they turned it into an Airbnb, and even people in the office building got upset about it. I'm like, what do you care? You know what I mean? You've got a locked office. It's a secure building and all that stuff. But people just have the impression that it's transients or something like that. I just don't. I think it's gotten out of that. But
I think that just comes from the scarcity mindset. When somebody, I think if you're doing it and you put enough effort into it and you invest into it and you're really trying to help a guest stay at some place and give them the enjoyable experience, then it's great. Yeah. I think it becomes a negative thing when you have one of those people who they constantly try to undercut and get something for nothing. You know what I mean? I got a closet here. You want to sleep in it? Give me $20,
Right. Well, in a lot of ways, you think about it, it's no different than a hotel, right? I mean, they're not, doing background checks. I think your situation that you live in your building.
Somebody's I'm pretty sure that guy would have rented individual corridors if he could have. He'd be all right, you get the hallway for $10. I'll give you the bathroom for half a day for $15. Mm-hmm. I get the couch over here so nobody can rent that. And you know what I mean? I think just when it becomes that and they have to consistently mince harder and harder to find that profit overhead, I think it just becomes you got to spend money to make money. You know?
I always it's funny when I was right out of school, right out of college, I always rented a place myself, so I was always the only person on the lease. And I'd always get a 2-bedroom, and I'd rent the other room out to a friend of mine. You know what I mean? So I was, I like the community, the, camaraderie. And so usually it was somebody I knew, wasn't a stranger, but it helped defer the cost. And a lot of times, it worked out really, really well. And one of the places, it's kind of interesting to note, I had a couple guys that have lived with me as roommates were starting a business and it went on to become millionaires, which is kind of neat too, to kind of see that process. And we kind of did those types of things together. So it was a neat.
Got another one right here,
there
Mr. Stars.
Yeah, right. You're next, man.
I'm next.
You're next, right?
I'm next.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun. When I was in California at the time, so there's a lot of opportunity. It used to be, because it was a growing state too. We moved there in 1987. And so, it was the real estate development was, popping then. That's what I did. I bought land for shopping centers. And so, I was kind of in the thick of it, and I lived in Beverly Hills. And so I was around a lot of people in the entertainment business, too. So there's a lot of feast and famine there. You know what I mean? So
Right. Yeah, because the people that are eating really, really well, but they're few and far between.
right, and the others are really struggling. It's kind of
The good majority of them haven't eaten in a long time.
well, that's right. Well, I dated a girl that she was. She was a waitress, and she modeled part time, and was a Jordache Jean girl, and she was in McDonald's commercial, and then she went into be. She was cast on the TV show ER, and that turned out to be a huge, show with George Clooney, and it's that one, the medical show in the '90s, and so so
I was on Burn Notice.
Yeah, right.
I just want to say I was on Burn Notice one episode. I can't tell you what episode because I'm not trying to spoil it, but
if you watch it
one episode, if you watch it on there, way in the back for one scene, I was there. I skipped school that day and I went to the beach, and that's that same day that they were recording it.
There? Oh, that's funny.
And I remember kept asking them, I was like, what are you taping for? And they're like, we can't tell you, you know what I mean? We're not supposed to tell you or whatever. And I remember I was walking by, and like they had set up like mannequin people in the background for a scene, right?
Yeah, right.
And they like set them up under umbrellas or whatever. And I was walking by the beach, and the umbrellas started to go, right? Because it was windy. So I hopped the fence because they had like the little like fence like do not cross, this is for only, you know what I mean? And
Right.
I grabbed the umbrella and I put it back where it was at, and they like ran up to me because they didn't see what I did, and they're like, what are you doing jumping the fence? Da, 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 da. I'm like, your umbrella was about to fly away. And then they vibed with it, and they were like, "Oh, cool! You want to be in the back of a scene or something, real quick?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm with it." You know what I mean? It's like, "All right, we're gonna put you way in the back over there. Just act like you're just looking in that direction." I was like, "I can do that," you know?
That's funny.
And it was actually really cool because maybe a couple months went by, and me, my mom, and my sister were all staying at a hotel because when we were growing up, we never had cable, right?
Right.
But for one night, we were staying at that hotel. And sure enough, we turned on. I can't remember what channel it was on, but we turned it on, and the episode was on, and I was in the background because we were watching the whole episode. Like, is this the episode? Because you never know. They go to different locations. You know what I mean? And I'm like, it could be this one, but And so that was my one story. So cool. Definitely in Florida, you have like a lot of videotaping too, and like movie production, stuff like that. Like that's come here, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely for the weather and everything. I mean, you can shoot longer times in the year too, and the golf industry here as well because of the the weather as well. You can golf year round here, so as
we got we got courses though. We got PGA, which is huge.
It's huge. There in Palm Springs in California is the mecca because it's hot though. It's really hot to golf in the summer there, but you can in the winter it's beautiful.
But you head down to the Gardens Mall, you're going to find 10, 15 PGA players just right there at the mall at any given moment, I mean, I went down there the other day, and I saw like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
They thought I was one.
They all live around that area. They do.
Yeah, they all live around that area, and they all have very lucrative jobs and girlfriends that know that they have lucrative jobs.
I mean, that's what it is.
I'm telling you.
It's a pro tip.
I was
there.
in line, and those guys were very upset with how much they were spending for perfume. I just want to say.
Wow.
$500.
That's crazy.
Right. It's exactly. It's come on. It's consumable. It's going to be an empty bottle in 2 or 3 months.
And they won't throw the bottle away.
500.
Right?
I don't know. I don't want to. No comment. I plead the
it's-
fifth on
it's-
that one.
It's a consumable. You're right. I mean, it's like, what do you do? Yeah. When it comes to money, when it comes to money, I'll tell you what. Probably better things to spend your money on than perfume. You know what I mean? $500 worth.
That's what they were saying,
Right.
but they were still in that line.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think as far as Airbnbs and stuff like that, and just actually getting roommates and things like that when I got started, I'll tell you what, I think that really made a big difference. First of all, build the camaraderie and somebody that you really watch who you bring close to you. You know what I mean? That's what my advice to folks is always. Be careful who you keep in your inner circle, and they've got to be encouraging, uplifting, positive, and that support your goals and encourage you in them. And I think it can defer some expenses too, or offset some expenses rather. As far as your living costs at the same time. And I think it's dangerous to be alone. There's no lone rangers. We all need encouragement. We all need companionship, and I think that I highly recommend that as opposed to marrying the wrong person. You know what I mean?
Well, even with landlords and renting rooms, I've rented probably from like 10 or 15 different people I've been alone since I was like 18, right? And I definitely felt like in the beginning I didn't really think like I needed to have a ongoing relationship with my landlord. I just thought it's like as long as they let me in the door, I pay my rent on time.
Yeah.
I didn't really feel like I needed to develop that, but the longer I sort of rented and the more wise I got, it's like I recognize you need to really have that like one-to-one connection. And if you don't have that, it's eventually going to splinter.
Yeah.
Maybe not
Yeah.
initially, but
Yeah.
when it does, when you do decide, hey, I want to move out and I have a different place, or that, which is exactly what happened with me. They end up depending on you.
When
and
you were in the space with them, like,
Right. Yeah.
right,
Like you
right.
just figure, I go there, I rented it for like 6 months, 7 months, and you start to feel nervous telling this person that you're leaving, right?
Right,
Because
right.
they've made it to a point where they have so many hooks and so many different things, right? Where like,
Well, I got to a point where I'd be so happy for them when they left. I mean, like we talk about it, like, hey, you know what, in advance. And I think that's always the way to address things like that. If someone has 6 to 8 months to find another roommate, you know what I mean? Because you've already talked about, hey, the long-term plan is this. Hey, I'm hoping to get married. I'm expecting to get engaged in the next 3 to 6 months. And so you're making those plans further out. And I think in preparing for those changes, I think it really helps both parties and can be a blessing to both.
it's true. But they also if you go into a house with people that have not the same standards as you can end up being around people who have bad habits, and you can end up being in a situation that might be compromising. So if I was coming up again, I would tell myself, make sure you find people with equal respect for morality, right? People who good people, even if you can get along with them, that doesn't mean you should shack up with them, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
You should want to live with somebody and be excited to see them the next time you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
like that. You shouldn't ever feel like the person you're gonna go, like your landlord, your roommate, you go home to dread. That's just not. Your home's supposed to be a place where you're safe.
Yeah, and you get to know anytime you live with someone, you really get to know someone too. I mean, it's just like one buddy of mine. I just couldn't believe how resourceful he was. He didn't pay for anything. You know what I mean? It was amazing. He would go, hey, it's Monday night. This place has a special and stuff. I know the cook or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'll go with you. Whatever. Go up and look at where we pay. He goes, no, he covers me on it. He gets a discount and he just covers it. I'm like, are you kidding me? And he goes, no.
And he's got 7 other chefs for every other day, right?
Exactly right. It's like, this guy's amazing. Like, you want to see a movie? I'm like, I'm not a movie person. He goes, well, I go for free. And I'm like,
Yeah.
"How do
Well,
go for free?"
I got some guy in the ticket office.
Right, exactly.
I introduced him to the
Like,
pizza chef.
Do you ever pay for anything? He goes, I could write a book, How to Live for Free in Orange County, California. I'm like, I said it'd sell 1 million copies.
It would.
Because it's an expensive place to live. But yeah, he was an interesting character. He became a millionaire too. He's one of the guys that So I think that resourcefulness, is a great attribute, and to have. And I think as long as you're not taking advantage of people, you push the envelope.
Staying flexible. That's the
Right.
biggest thing, because you got to be able to recognize an opportunity. Because I know about 5 years ago, people were really hesitant about Airbnbs. They're like, I don't want to rent out my stuff. But now the people that actually risked it
Yeah, did
are doing
well.
very, very well,
That's a
right?
good point, Sonny. That's a very good point. You got to eat that risk reward. And it's like, everyone has to weigh it for themselves. And I think you have to, hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst. You know what I mean?
Right, and always ask that question: is the wave already passed, or are we in the middle of it? And it's a good question to ask. I mean,
Right.
I think we're on the tail end of that, but I do think there's still time where you can be successful if you were doing that right now.
Absolutely. I think one of the things what I like about Airbnb, there might be times and seasons where it does really well, or in a certain location, that type of thing, and it might come and go. But long term, I mean, as far as the underlying asset, real estate, I mean, you can always turn it into a long term rental, and
Right.
20 years from now, you're going to be in great shape. You know what I mean? I mean, 20 years. You pick any time in history, in 20 years from any point in time, real estate's appreciated. You know what I mean? There's no exceptions really. So
Yeah, long term.
yeah, right.
You gotta see it long term though, because if you're too obsessed on how it did yesterday versus today, that's so small in the time frame of like a good 10, 20 years that
Right.
you just got to really stay flexible with it, and it'll come back eventually. You know?
Yeah, you sure will. And some of the things. Well, what do you think, Brent? I'm going to sell my property and buy gold. And I said, well, the thing with gold is, it doesn't generate property. It's property. It doesn't generate a profit. It doesn't generate income at all, right? It just sits there. And so it's cool as a parking place if you think that
No one's gonna rent your gold.
Right, exactly. There's no income potential on it. It does have appreciation potential, but the thing about real estate, it has 3 things that gold really doesn't have. It has appreciation. They can be leveraged. For one thing, it has income. you know what I mean, current income, and it has, you know, potential write-offs too, you know, tax deductions and things like that. So,
And it's shelter in case anything does go bad long
right.
term. You lose your other sort of source of income. You can always fall back to that shelter. You know,
And you need shelter. You know what I mean? So
sometimes.
yeah, right. Sometimes, unless you really rough it, if you're a cowboy. But if you
There's an asterisk there.
right, exactly right. We'll cover that later. No, but isn't that true though? I mean, you can't live under your gold. So you know, so it's shelter. So yes, there's a lot of benefits to real estate. It's one of the reasons I chose to get into it years and years ago. I'm like, hey, how can I bless people in the greatest way? And what's the biggest line item in their checking account? You know, their checkbook.
Everyone needs a home.
Right.
It's the American dream to have your own space, right?
Right. And if we can help people get the financing for it, you know, make that dream come true, and that's always the situation, right? It's everyone wants a home, but you know, how do we make it happen financially? And so, you know, we're the ones that solve that problem, and I'm proud to do what I've done for 25 years because it really has been a blessing to help so many people.
Yeah, well, I think it's good just because there's so many people that come in and they feel like they're unqualified or they feel like they're a lot further behind than they actually are. In reality, they just need to tweak a couple little things and then they're more qualified than, you know, the average person, you know. It's like you just get super shy about your finances and you don't really know the standards and the qualifications, and so nobody really wants to let you look under the hood, really, you know, because they're scared that you're going to look down on them, you know.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you what, unless you step out and really take a risk that way, and the first
Airbnb, unless you step out and take that risk, you ain't going to be successful.
That's exactly 100%. And so it's really getting past the fear. You know, this is the thing. You know, one day we're all, believe it or not, Sonny, one day none of us are going to be here. You know what I mean? Because there's, you know, no one gets out of here alive, right?
According to the news, Russia might take us out soon. So.
I know, right? So I mean, I'm a big proponent in you know, no regrets, right? And so, you know, I think, you know, if you know, you don't want to lay on your deathbed saying, "Gosh, I wish I would have, I could have done this," and that type of thing. And I think that's a horrible, you know, thought to have. You know, do you want to leave it on the field? You know, as my football coach would say. You know what I mean? Just, you know, you got to just, you know, the time you have here. Personally, I believe we're going to celebrate in heaven for eternity what we did here for the kingdom, right? And so
watching on the big screen replay.
Yeah, right. Big screen replay and check it out. You know, and we'll celebrate those things. You know, and so I think that, you know, we'll see the things that we did for the kingdom, and that's all that's going to last. All, you know, the cars are going to be gone and all that stuff. So I think, you know, it's where we stepped out in faith. One thing I told my kids the other day, I said, what's
my movie's going to have a badass soundtrack. I'm just going to say it's going to have some metal guitar in there.
Man.
Yeah. It's going to have Eye of the Tiger in there.
That's it, man. Soundtracks make a movie, dude. But the thing that, you know, I was telling my kids the other day, it's like, you know, just you want to, you know, just do what you're called to do, right? And like, you know, you don't want to have any regrets, you know, moving forward. You know,
right. And you know what? I actually heard a really interesting analogy the other day. When people are feeling depressed, it's actually them not being in alignment with whatever their destiny is supposed to be. So like say you're depressed because you're in a 9-to-5 job, but you're really supposed to be a comedian, right? Well, unless you're actually on that stage and you're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing because God called you to be this comedian, right? You're never going to feel like alive almost. So like the more you start walking in the other direction from what God wants you to do, the more unfulfilled and bland and monotonous your life is going to get. But if you're going the same direction that, you know, God wants you to go, you're going to start to find, wow, I'm a lot more motivated than I've ever been. I'm having a lot more fun than I've ever been. It's like a positive. It pulls you, right? And I take that because God made that for you. He made you to go to that direction. But we have all these people's opinions, our parents, our, you know, peers, and they tell us, oh, you should do this, you should do that. This is what you should become. This is how you should think. The government's like, you should have these standards, right? But when you start living by different standards than who you've actually been called to be, then you start trying to numb that pain, you know. And I think that's where a lot of like the big problems that are for substance abuse come from, is those people are constantly trying to numb that pain of going in a different direction than they've been called to go in.
Amen. No, that's preach it, man. That's awesome. That's good. Hey, you know, I think, you know, another thing I tell my kids too is like, you know, there's one thing you can't do in heaven. I've ever told you this, Sonny?
There's one thing you can't do in heaven?
That you cannot do in heaven.
You can't swear because they bleep it.
Right, they bleep that. You know, but one thing you cannot do in heaven is you can't exercise your faith.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Right?
Because it's all there.
It's all there. You're in the presence of God. And Jesus. I mean, you're just in the presence of perfection, right? And so, you know, here is the opportunity, and it's our only opportunity while we're on this earth is to exercise our faith and show like, hey, I trust you, Lord. I'm going to step out in faith and do and take that risk. I'm going to.
It's one thing to wave the banner, right, when you're standing in the middle of the Pentagon, right, and it's another to be in the trench, right, still waving that banner, right?
Oh yeah, right. You know, it's funny because I've met a lot of people before they were millionaires too. Some of my roommates and some people I met because where I lived in Hollywood, in Beverly Hills and all that stuff. I met. Jerry Seinfeld before he was famous. You know what I mean?
You met Jerry Seinfeld?
Yeah, it was really
That's cool.
Yeah. And he was nervous. He was going out before he was going up to. He was an ex-comedian. It was the Hollywood Improv, and he was in the back, and he's like, and he wasn't laughing at any of the jokes, and I'm laughing. This guy was great, and I just didn't want to go back to my seat because if you interrupt the show, they always make fun of you and call you out. So I just want to wait until he finished, and then I'd sit down. And I asked Jerry, I said, what? Don't you think this guy's funny? He goes, he is really good. He goes, I admire his work, but I'm on next. I'm just kind of nervous. You know what I mean?
Okay,
so
makes sense.
Yeah, so just having that kind of conversation with Jerry Seinfeld. You know, later he becomes really famous. Like, oh my gosh, that's Jerry. You know what I mean? Like I met that.
And
guy.
the show Seinfeld, right?
Right, exactly. It was like maybe 2 or 3 years before the show, before he got his show, and I just totally remember that night because I was there with a famous person. You know, my date was a famous person. And the person sitting behind me, this is how fame works, by the way. The person sitting behind me was Fawn Hall. Fawn Hall was the most, I guess, the biggest celebrity you can imagine for like 2 weeks. You know, she was the one that worked for Ollie North that was during the Iran-Contra crisis or scandal. She was hiding documents and sneaking them out of the office, you know what I mean, and all that stuff in her dress, and it all came out during these
I see. She was like the Epstein.
Yeah, it was like a real big scandal.
Or not Epstein. What's the name of that one guy? The guy Snowden.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Snowden leaked and then he became famous in like all these different countries.
Well, she was taking documents out for some reason. I can't remember all the details of it, but you know, she had an entourage of people, bodyguards, and all things around her. And she came to Hollywood because she was so famous. Everyone knew who she was from these trials, these hearings, right, in Congress, and it was a huge deal in the Reagan administration. And so, you know, it's funny, but no one knew Jerry Seinfeld, who was in the back of the room, and no one knew who I was with because she wasn't famous yet, right? And so,
but there's 3 famous people right there.
Right there, and all in one time, all within, you know, people I'm actually sitting around talking to. She sat right behind me, and I'm sitting there, but no one knows who Fawn Hall is now. But everyone knows.
Yeah, I have no idea who that is.
People, right. And so fame comes and goes. You know, it's really there's something more to fame. It's really about doing what the Lord called you to, taking that risk, and never giving up. You know, it's a process. You know, stick with it, whatever the Lord calls you to, and just stick with it. You know, and leave it on the field. That's my advice.
Leave it on the field.
Leave it on the field, baby.
I think that's a good place to close it up, right?
Yeah, let's do it. Remember, if you guys have any ideas or topics you'd like to cover, make sure you comment on those below.
If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Check out some of the other content. Follow us on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter.
If you enjoyed the podcast today, make sure you give us a thumbs up. And remember, we'll be releasing a new episode every Thursday right here on the Unitas Lending YouTube channel.
So we'll see you guys next week on Thinking Out Loud.
With Brent
and Sonny. You guys have a good weekend.